What's up everyone? Welcome to the channel. This is my Texas Blues machine. This is my King B Oak Cliff guitar. It's obviously a Strat-style guitar. I've got a lot to talk about with this guitar. I'm actually titling this video Part 1 because there are some changes that I'm going to be making to it. So I'll talk about those in a second as well, and I look forward to making a Part 2 for this later on down the road to show you how it all ended up. But first, let's talk about this guitar. There's actually some controversy in the guitar community about King B guitars, and I'll expand on that. This is not the original King B guitars. I guess we can start there. The original King B guitars, and their website is literally originalkingbguitars.com, is based in Nashville, Tennessee. I've never been there in person, but I found this online. They do guitar repairs, restorations, sales, setups, all kinds of stuff like that. They've been there a long time. I would love to check it out. This is King B guitars from Texas. I want to say Lubbock, Texas, but don't quote me. I could be wrong on that. They came around much later, basically, and got into the relicing business. They were building Strat-style guitars, Tele styles, kind of sticking within the Fender realm, doing the whole Relic'd vintage style instrument thing while that was really hot in the guitar community for a few years. From what I can tell now, they are no longer in business. The Texas one that came later, it seems like they were in business. I don't think they're in business anymore. You can tell that the Texas one has this logo here. You can see up close. It's got the B and everything, King B guitars. So you're gonna see a few of these online and whatnot. They were around for a while, but again, not to be confused with the store that's in Nashville, Tennessee. So let me talk a little bit about this guitar. First and foremost, obviously it is not a Fender Stratocaster. It is clearly based on a 1950s Stratocaster, not a 60s, not a late 60s, early 60s, but a 50s Stratocaster. And to be even more specific than that, it's based on a Texas style Strat. And I never knew that I liked these until I held it in my hands. The quick story is that back in like the 2011, 2012 time frame, I was just getting hip to the whole Relic'd guitar craze that was going on. I don't know how long it had been popular before that, but that's when I was first introduced to Nash guitars. Now, I'm born and raised in Seattle. I've lived elsewhere, and I currently live in Henderson, Nevada, but I grew up in Seattle, and I found out about Bill Nash building Relic'd style Fender guitars in Olympia, Washington, and I never got a chance to play one until I was on a visit to Los Angeles. I went to Norman's Rare Guitars in LA. It's like the most iconic guitar store in the world, and I got to play some Nash Strat-style guitars, and I fell in love with them immediately. I've owned Fender Stratocasters. I've had 2 Mexican Strats and 1 American Strat in my lifetime. I know what a good Strat feels like, but I'd never played one. I'd never played like an old one from the 50s and 60s, and playing the Nash was the closest thing to me, and it was just like butter in your hands. I couldn't believe it. So I had my heart set on getting a Nash for quite a few years. About 5 years went by, and then in early 2015, 4 or 5 years, yeah, early 2015, I was in the market for a Stratocaster. I was ready to buy a Stratocaster. I knew that I could afford a nice like new USA made Strat, and that'd be fine, but I still really had my heart set on a vintage style one like the Nashes that I had played. If you go Fender custom shop, you're going to pay 4 or 5 grand for something like that, and I just couldn't stomach that type of an expense. The Nashes are, less than half that. You're around the $2,000 mark for a Nash, so I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to shop for. I was living in Seattle at the time. I was looking around various guitar stores, and I ended up walking into Dusty Strings, which is primarily known as an acoustic guitar store in the Fremont neighborhood of Seattle, but they had some really nice electrics. That was actually the moment that I was introduced to Collings electrics, and now I think of Collings as like the greatest guitars across the board in the world. I mean, if you were saying who makes the best acoustics and electrics across the board, I think Collings is probably that. I'd never heard of them until visiting Dusty Strings, but this thing was sitting there on the wall, and it immediately caught my eye. The first thing I thought of was Hendrix at Woodstock. I mean, he had the white Strat with the white pickguard and the maple fingerboard. It was. I don't think that was a 50s style one, but still was a very similar guitar, and it caught my eye. So I started playing it, and I immediately fell in love with it, and I don't think I could articulate to you at that time as well as I can now why I loved it so much. Certainly one part was the feel of the neck, and if I turn it over here, you can see that there's raw wood. They took the time to lacquer the back of the neck, but then sand off the area where your hand is going to be, and therefore it just makes it feel like butter in your palm. There's no stickiness whatsoever. So I loved that. What I don't think I realized that I loved, but I've come to love a lot, are these jumbo stainless steel frets. And the jumbo frets are part of the whole Texas Strat thing that King B was going after. I'm a huge fan of Stevie Ray Vaughan. At that time, I was reading a biography about him, and I learned a lot about him and how it relates to this guitar. And I guess Stevie used to take bass frets because they were larger and put them on his guitar because he liked the feeling of fatter frets. I've heard about the whole jumbo fret thing for a long time, but I never knew the difference until this guitar, and I don't think I even connected it at first. It was later on I just realized that it just a little bit easier to fret the note, a little bit easier to hold the note while you're in a bend. You know, you can hold it pretty easily that way compared to a skinnier vintage style fret. So I immediately fell in love with the neck on this thing, and it became my main guitar for quite a while. I was really into the whole, you know, Texas blues thing. I mean, this thing does that very well. But after 7 years of having it in this configuration, I've decided that there's a couple changes that I'm going to be making shortly. So before I get into that, I wanted to make a video of it in its current state. I'm going to run through some of the different pickups. I'm going to play some kind of bluesy stuff here. You know, Stevie Ray, Jimmy type stuff. And then we'll talk about the upcoming changes to it. So here we go. Oh, actually, before we get that, really quickly, one other thing about the story. It's called an Oak Cliff by King B Guitars. Oak Cliff is the neighborhood in Dallas where Stevie Ray Vaughan and his brother Jimmy first lived and started playing the guitar. Most people associate Stevie with Austin, Texas, and rightfully so. He moved there as a teenager, and that's where his professional musical career began. But before that, they lived in the Oak Cliff neighborhood of Dallas, and that's when Jimmy Vaughan first became a big guitar star. He was known as the best guitar player in Texas. They were living in Dallas at the time. He was a huge inspiration for Stevie to keep going. So this is an homage to those Texas roots. The pickups are Amalfitano hand-wound pickups. They're awesome for Texas blues. They're just, there's a lot of hum. I've got a noise suppressor on, and you can still hear the hum going on in here. You hear it in the background. That's part of the thing that I want to change. If I turn off the noise suppressor, a lot of hum. See, there's a lot of hum going on, and this is kind of one of the problems for me with not wanting to use this in a lot of different scenarios because the hum is just too much. Noise suppressor, it's better, but when I'm playing, the hum still comes through. Anyway, we'll get to the changes that are coming soon. I'm going to play this thing a little bit, enough talking. Here we go. Of the neck pickup, the neck and the middle, and then finishing up here on the middle. I'm going to go to the back two here, kind of a honky sound. Full bridge, really kind of rock and honky. Applications, you know, anything kind of Stevie Ray-ish, or like if I want to do like pickup is also really useful. So hopefully that gives you an idea. I mean, this thing is great for what it does. From where I'm at as a player right now, and this is kind of leading into some of the changes that I want to make to it, I find that the lack of output and overall sustain from these pickups is kind of not fitting in well to the rest of the music that I like to play. It's great for the vintage thing. I've had it set up as a 50s style vintage Strat for 7 years now, and it's been awesome. And it's, you know, a lot of the stuff that I've learned here that I was just playing was learned on this guitar and learning that style of music, and it's sort of ingrained into what I do at this point. But from where I am right now and what makes me want to play more, the hum on these pickups and the lack of sustain that I was just mentioning kind of doesn't fit in, and it causes me to not want to play it as often as some of the other ones, unless I'm really looking to do this sort of thing or maybe a funky sort of thing. It just becomes compartmentalized, and I want it to be more than that or better than that. So the two things that are on my nerves are basically just the pickups I'm going to keep them. You know, I can always go back to using these. It's not like I'm getting rid of them, but I'm going to swap out the pickups. And the other thing is the bridge. It's a 50s style vintage tremolo, and when I got it, they did a setup for me, a professional setup at Dusty Strings, and they sort of recommended on going with the 3 springs right here, 3 heavy gauge springs, and they told me straight up, like, look, this will limit your ability to manipulate the bar, but the flip side is it's going to drastically improve your tuning stability. And that's absolutely true. Like, this thing holds in tune really well. It's got the old vintage style tuners where you pop it down the top, and I actually love those. It stays in tune very well, but the bar is almost unusable to me. Not because it's so hard for me to muscle it or whatever, but because the tension is so tight, it becomes non-musical trying to use it. It's just sort of like barely on or not on at all, and so I just don't even do it. Like, I rest my hand here, and I want to do more with the bridge. So I did some research for Strat bridge replacements, and long story short, ended up choosing a Vega trim that's going to fit as a drop-in replacement. It's going to have lighter tension, but it's going to allow me to go up and down with the trim rather than only being able to go down and forcefully so. So it's going to give me a lot more options musically to manipulate the note with the bar. I'm excited about that. The other thing is the pickup selection here. I want something that's still going to sound Stratty, but is going to cancel the hum. And there's plenty of options out there. I mean, just to name a few, you've got Yngwie Malmsteen's YJM Furies, you've got Paul Gilbert's Injector set. There's plenty of others as well. Those are just the first two that come to mind for me. I don't know exactly what I'm going to end up with yet, but I plan on making this kind of a fun project because I'm going to let this pickguard go too. The white on white thing is cool, but I feel like having something else that gives a little more character is going to be fun. So I'm going to change that up. That's going to require some soldering and some wiring on my end, so it's going to be kind of a fun little project between doing all this stuff and getting the new bridge in it. So I'm going to demo the guitar again for you at that point. But for now, I just wanted to show it for what it always has been, right? I mean, I don't have any, opinion one way or the other on the controversy of King Bee guitars versus the original. I was never even looking for this, but it's honestly the best Strat I've ever played. I know it's not a Fender, but it just plays amazing, and really it's the neck that makes it that way. This neck for my left hand, between the way it feels on the back and these frets, the jumbo stainless steel frets, I just absolutely love it. It's a 21 fret guitar, and Yngwie was talking about that in a video that I was watching recently, where the genius of this design is on the old vintage Strats is that this neck pickup is sitting at exactly where the 24th fret would be if this continued, and the harmonic that you get there is best, and that was a genius move by Leo Fender in that original design. So I like the idea of continuing. I mean, if Yngwie can shred on a 21 fret guitar, I'm not worried about my ability to get around on a 21 fret or even though most of the rest of them I have are 22 or 24 frets. That said, again, I love the ergonomics of this guitar. It's extremely comfortable. I'm glad I didn't spend all the money on the Fender Custom Shop, because then I wouldn't be changing anything. I would have never put my initials on the back and let my son finger paint something. I would have never considered pulling the pickups out or changing anything, because it's too perfect the way it is. This is a parts caster, man. It's meant to be that way. And again, I can put it back to this setup if that's what I choose later on. I'm kind of ready for something new. It's been 7 years in this setup. Let's try something else. So I'm sure you get it. I'm looking forward to making the changes and doing a part 2 video. I'm gonna play it out. Thanks for sticking with me. If you enjoy my stuff, please help me out by subscribing to the channel. I would totally appreciate that. And we'll see you in the next video. All right, here we go.